Welcome to the Map It Forward podcast, everyone, and welcome especially to my guest, Muki Yeung. Welcome to the podcast, Muki.
Hey,
It's
morning or evening? Or
it's afternoon here, 4 p.m. It's 9 a.m. where you are?
yes,
Awesome.
9:03.
9:03 in the Sheraton on the Park in Sydney. You're in quarantine right now, right?
Yes, day 9 of quarantine. Day 9 of 14, so almost there.
What happens next? Do you get to go home, or do you go to another state, or are you home in Sydney?
I'm home in Sydney, thankfully. And they relaxed the quarantine here a little bit. Initially, if you flew into, say you're from Brisbane, if your flight flew into Sydney, you had to do 2 weeks quarantine in Sydney, fly to Brisbane and then do another 2 weeks. But they've relaxed that now, thankfully. So, I mean, 2 weeks is bad enough, let alone having to do almost a full month or basically a full month in quarantine.
A lot of the Aussies that were going back home from America in the Australians in LA group and Australians in San Diego group, a lot of them were saying that if they lived in Brisbane, what they had to do was go to spend 2 months in Sydney and then 2 months in Brisbane. Sorry, 2 weeks in Sydney, 2 weeks in Brisbane, and have to take care of things that way. That just sounds like a bit of a nightmare, but I'm glad you're safe. Yeah. So the reason you are in quarantine is because since you were on the podcast last, you have a new country that you live in.
Yeah. In December, I moved to Kenya.
Nice.
So I've joined Dorman's Coffee in Kenya as their specialty coffee trader.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Bit of a dream job.
Yeah.
Very, very grateful.
So you used to work for Condesa Collab.
Yes.
And you were doing specialty coffee trading there, correct?
Yes.
And now you're doing that for Dorman's in Kenya. What's it like are you doing the same thing in an origin country, or is it different?
Same, but different. Different at origin. And I think it's why I wanted to go back. Prior to me taking this job, I was in Australia for a year, but the 2 years before that, I was in Brazil, and I ended up falling in love with origin.
Yeah.
And as much as I love my life in Sydney, I really missed origin. So when the opportunity came up to take this, I went ahead with it. It's just nice to be connected to the source.
Is it that you like the energy around the farm, or is it the people thing? Is it the nature thing? Is it
I think it's a bit of everything. It's the fact I have the ability to drive down to a farm or meet the producer or whenever I want. It's right there. Like, you feel connected.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just go on a drive and go check out a coffee farm or step onto a field and look at trees. I can do that. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's right there, and it's about 10, 15 minutes away from my office.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's just so much more dynamic. So if you want things to change, you can, instead of having to fight through things, right? Which you sort of, when you move back to a country like Australia, things just move far slower. Just being there, you can force things to change or push for change or be involved, and you can watch it happen. It's just more dynamic, and I really missed it. Yeah.
Is the coffee experience different for you being in Kenya?
Compared to?
So the coffee experience you have when you live in Sydney is quite a Sydney coffee culture experience, right? You drink coffee the way it's brewed in Sydney. There are espresso machines there. You get your latte or whatever it is that you drink, aside from your ritualistic cupping side of things, right? I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the coffee drinking culture in Kenya is very different to the coffee drinking culture in Sydney, Australia.
Absolutely.
And
Locals there don't really drink coffee, for
yeah,
one.
okay,
Everyone drinks tea, chai or tea or milk tea,
yeah,
very sweet milk tea. It's mostly expats that drink
right,
coffee. And there is a small specialty coffee scene there
yeah.
that roast coffee, and they have a great group of barista competitors as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they do pretty well. But
Nice.
still growing, you know.
Yeah. So if you want to experience coffee in Kenya, you would tend to just brew it for yourself?
Yes. Or the good cafes and roasteries that they have there are good.
Oh, really? Awesome.
And you can find them.
Yeah,
They have a
nice.
couple of independents there too.
How is so when you left Kenya to come home to be quarantined and shelter in place in Australia, what was the vibe that you left back in Kenya with regards to COVID-19?
I think we were sort of at a tipping point where probably best that I start from the beginning,
Please do.
which around mid-March, the news, we started to see in the news, and there were announcements that we had our first case of corona. And it was someone
Mid-March?
returned around mid-March.
Right.
And it had been someone who returned from the US via London in early March. And they'd
Right.
been in the country for about 2 weeks. Of course, just discussion amongst friends and people that I knew, that behind the scenes we thought that there's no way in hell that there was only one case. There were definitely way more than that.
Right.
And there is a little bit of belief that the numbers that they give now are vastly under what reality is
Yeah.
probably.
I suspect that for a lot of countries.
Yeah.
I suspect that that's the case for a lot of countries, even the US. I mean, it's just the way that it is.
Yeah, like right now, numbers are 179 cases in Kenya confirmed, 6 dead, 9 recovered.
Yeah, wow.
And for a country the size of Kenya, just simply, if you look at Nairobi's population, which is about almost 4.5 million people, it just doesn't make sense that there's only 179, particularly with how dense the population is there and how close you are to people. You're frequently in contact.
Right.
Yeah.
Could
There's this.
could that be like what? So when I had it, I'm one of the people that had it that didn't contribute to the number that they were reporting, because we didn't have any tests here in San Diego, so I couldn't get tested for it. But I had like textbook cases, symptoms of what it was. So you know when you've got it. Trust me, you know when you've got it. Well, I mean, if you're expressing symptoms, if you're asymptomatic, you obviously wouldn't know that you've got it. But I did have symptoms. I wouldn't have been included in the number of what they're reporting because they didn't have tests to give them to us. And they're still really hard to get in San Diego.
That's exactly that. You've got a big population of people in Nairobi who are destitute.
Yeah.
You've got one of the biggest slums in the world exists in Nairobi, in a place called Kibera. And people live in tiny shanties, really close contact with each other. And these are people who can't stop working.
And they won't get tested.
No. And it's not just the access to healthcare, it's also lack of hygiene.
Yeah.
They don't have running water. If they want to travel, they have to use public transport, and the most common way of traveling there is by like a private bus called matatus. So they're just converted vans or old buses.
Right.
And even though they've implemented recommendations and laws about sanitizing these matatus and social distancing, these vans are still full, like
Chockers. Yeah.
crammed full of people. No sanitizer, no soap. And if you want water, you have to go queue up at a place where you can access clean water. And there is a little bit of this belief, just speaking to some locals there, particularly people who live in these areas and work these jobs, that they don't think they call it a Mzungu disease.
What does that mean?
Mzungu meaning white man.
Oh, so they don't
So
think they're going to be affected.
No,
Right.
no. So for a lot of people, they just don't see, one, they can't prepare for it. They can't afford to stock up on food or supplies or anything like that. They just don't have the funds and they don't have the access. Two, they don't have access to medical care, and the time involved to go get tested, you're losing a day's work.
Wow.
Yeah, and then three, on top of that, social distancing, hygiene, when you live in a slum like that, just, yeah.
It's not possible
No,
or plausible or anything like that. Do you think, are they starting to see any kind of a spread happening in those communities yet, from what you've heard?
I'm not sure. I feel like that's something that the government is probably going to keep under wraps a little bit. There is this sense that when I read Kenyan media, it is not as truthful or open and as what I'm reading, say, in Western media. So I know that here in Australia, people feel like the government's hiding information, but they're giving us way, way more than what I'm seeing in Kenya. It feels like they're trying to keep the lid on things just to keep the peace, to keep it calm, because they don't.
Would there be an uproar or an uprising?
That there's that little bit of potential, particularly if the lockdowns are far stricter.
Okay.
Like if they stop people from working, these people are paid. They live hand to mouth. They get paid day by day.
Yep.
So you go to work, whatever it is that you do, you'll probably get paid cash, and then you go to the supermarket and buy maize flour, and that's
dinner for a week.
Yeah. So you can't afford not to work. So I guess there's just that trying to keep things calm by trickling information out.
This is the big disparaging thing between what we experience in the very rich countries that we live in versus trying to get our head around understanding the reality of a lot of the origin countries that supply our value chain, and understanding how the poorer communities are going to experience this pandemic in with very different opportunity to what we have.
Yes. Here, just seeing the way people are clearing out supermarkets, I didn't have any problem buying goods in Kenya. In fact, I actually bought some things to bring home because it was easier just buying them there. And traveling back to Australia with them than trying to fight for it over here. But it's because people can't afford it. It's not like here where you have the money to go buy 2 years worth of toilet paper and pasta.
Yeah.
People just can't afford to do that over there. So you can walk into any supermarket and the shelves are full.
I mean, there's so many different directions this conversation could go with this particular topic. So people who give us a landscape of what life looks like right now for a Kenyan coffee producer, a picker, not someone who owns a business, not someone who owns a farm. Sorry, go on.
A picker.
Yep.
Oh, at the moment, there will be some work. Rurally, things seem to be going on as per normal. But in the cities, it's probably a bit harder.
Right.
During this time, we're sort of between harvests. So the work that you get would be, if you are getting work on a coffee farm,
Yeah.
it would be things like pruning, just maintaining, weeding, maintaining the trees. It's more likely that these farms will have permanent staff that are doing that, and you as a picker are probably finding work elsewhere. So you might be picking pineapples at this time
Right.
or working on another crop because we're in this between time.
Sorry, Muki,
Say
when does the next harvest start?
in a few months. So we're coming up to early harvest now, probably in about the next month or so.
Jeez. I mean, this couldn't have come at a worse time for Kenya.
It's actually okay. In a way, we're better off than other countries because we've had our main harvest, and the bulk of our visitors came just before the worst of this hit. So we were still able to receive visitors to come and purchase coffee, visit farms. In that sense, I feel like we're far luckier than, say, Brazil or other countries just who are just leading into the time when they would typically receive visitors and have a lot of workers on farms and estates.
So, as they're coming into this situation, and we're a few months away from them starting their next harvest, what is the mindset of people who own businesses going into this if this takes some time to start penetrating into Kenya? Do you get the sense that they're thinking that way, or are they just moving along with business as usual in Kenya?
Coffee is lucky to be listed on what they consider essential products in Kenya.
Okay.
So there has been very minimal impact for us outside of just the lockdown. At the moment, it's business as usual. So we can still, our staff can still work, our staff can still go into the office, people are still working on farms, we can still export coffee. At the moment, it's business as usual. Our hours are just slightly different because everyone needs to clock off in time to get home before curfew.
Is that a new curfew because of this pandemic?
Yes, there was not a curfew before. So there's now 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. curfew.
5 a.m. or 5 p.m.?
Oh, sorry, 5 a.m. 5 a.m.
Yeah.
to 7 p.m.
Oh. You're allowed to be out, but
Yes.
outside of that, you have to be indoors.
You must be indoors. You must
after
be at
7
home.
p.m.
Yes, and
So no restaurants. I think Muki's screen has frozen there with the Sheridan Wi-Fi. We are at the whim of the Wi-Fi in the country that she's in. Oh, bless her heart. Muki? I mean, Australia's Wi-Fi is... Okay.
sorry, Skype crash.
Totally okay. I just have to readjust my audio because of the sound system, but that's totally okay. Skype crash, and I'm sure the Wi-Fi is not helping over there as it all goes.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in this hotel.
Yeah.
Probably all watching Netflix or something.
I mean, there's not a lot for you guys to do, is there?
No. I'm lucky that at the very least I have work, and I bought books and things. But I know that there are some people here who just turned up, basically.
Wow. I mean, there's just a lot of people leaving where they are just with what they can carry. People here are, we're just going to take what we can carry in a suitcase and we're just going to go home. Mm-hmm. Like, you could be there for months.
Yep.
Yeah. So going back, so there was a curfew in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
And with regards to that curfew that still exists now, there wasn't a curfew before that. Business as usual for producers in coffee
At this point in time, yes.
at this point in time.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you receive, but now's not the time for you to be receiving visitors into Kenya
Oh,
for
no.
coffee, right?
No, I don't think you can even fly into the country at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got the landscape of what that's like for right now. So when it came to the way things were right before this happened, had you guys done all the business that you needed to do for this harvest that's just passed?
More or less. We did see a little bit of an impact that predominantly visitors from Asian countries couldn't travel.
Okay.
Even if there were plans, a lot of them were cancelled. So we had to start to work around that.
Sending samples and things like that?
Yes. Which a lot of the countries leading up to their harvest will have to change the way that they do things. It's been more difficult to send samples in now for a lot of these countries. It's just stricter, or it takes more time compared to what it used to.
So for anyone who doesn't understand what we're talking about, Muki, can you explain just the general steps of how people come into Kenya or come to an origin country, pick the coffees that they want, buy them, and then what can you talk about that a little bit for people who aren't aware of how that goes?
I guess with special in particular, it's a business built on relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It's why buyers want to travel to origin and meet people like me, or for me to introduce them to the producers of the co-ops that they wish to purchase from, so we can build this relationship chain.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been such a interesting part of the specialty side of the business.
Right.
So with all this going on, we're losing that part of things. Like, people want to feel connected. The coffee supply chain is so long and convoluted that being able to do this has always been such a special thing.
Mm-hmm.
You don't ever consider, if you eat, I don't know, cornflakes, you're not going to fly to wherever it is that they're importing corn from to meet the producer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we can do that with coffee.
Yeah. I mean, I was having a chat with a friend the other day, and he said the face of coffee has changed forever now.
Yes.
Are you getting a
Sorry.
business call in there?
It's just
Oh,
gonna
dear.
put that away. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Everything's happening at the one time. People could call me all week, and they call me today
when you're on a podcast. So people come to Origin. They meet you. You introduce them to producers. You introduce them to co-ops. You get to show them around. Be a bit of an interpreter, I'm assuming, of culture. Well, things like, culture that you understand. Let's say Australians are going to Kenya. You know what parts to tell them. This part is a part of the local culture that's different to Australian culture, and you'll need to just be respectful here and do that. And those are the kinds of things that are important for someone like you. It's why someone like you is incredibly important. For people like me who have never been to Kenya before, having someone like you on the ground has many layered benefits to it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so people go there, they get to experience the farm, they get to collect stories and experiences that they can use to translate and pass on to their customers who are the end consumers of the coffee. They collect photos, they can build a backstory that helps them extend the reach of this complex commodity product that they are then going and making a brew from in whatever way that they choose to do that, or they're selling the beans. So it's a part of the romance of the whole thing. That's part of it, right? There's also a very important business element to being able to go to Origin.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what the business side of going to Origin looks like for people?
if you can afford to do it, it's just being able to meet or having that producer meet the end client can build a long-lasting relationship between the two if it works out. But also, there's a sense of surety on both ends that the producer knows that their coffee is going to someone that is paying good money for it, and then the roaster or the buyer knows that they're doing the right thing.
Right.
Yep.
And when someone comes to Origin, they're able to cup all the coffees that are available,
Yes.
and they get to make more direct decisions on the coffees that they're purchasing, as opposed to having someone send them a select group of samples and say,
Yes.
pick from these. Right. So
Yes.
going to Origin has those kinds of added benefits to it.
Yes.
Correct.
Or being able to experience, like, our tables are massive in Kenya. During peak season, I might be cupping, I don't know, several hundred individual coffees. And
Over the span of
a day.
wow.
So our tables are huge. I'll send you a photo that people
Please do.
can
I'll
take a look
post
at.
it. I'll post it on our Instagram.
Or check out my Instagram because I've got some photos there.
Do it. Muki's Instagram is in the show notes, just so that you know.
There's a few photos of, like, I'll have a Friday afternoon where I cup over 100 coffees easily.
Wow.
But coming up into that, if you're buying, it's very difficult if you're not coming just to say, okay, I want a coffee like this.
Right.
And we can send you samples and you might be able to find it, but it's just faster and more convenient in ways. When you're coming here, you go and inspect the farm, you meet the farmer, you feel like, okay, these guys are doing the right thing. You fall in love with that, you go to the coffee table, you cup it, and you might find something that you weren't really looking for that you think is exceptional. Or if anything, a lot of the time what we get is people will go to visit these places, meet these people, go to the coffee table, go to the cupping table, cup blind, and somehow manage to score the place that they visited the best. And
Yeah, right.
but being able to see that translate into the cup,
Yep.
it just cements the whole thing. Yeah.
So here's one of the first big questions. How do you think that what's happening right now is going to change the way coffee works in Kenya?
It's really difficult to tell at this point since we're just past our main crop. Most of the specialty coffee buyers around the world have bought their Kenya for the year.
Has it shipped yet?
I would say about half has shipped. We've still got some heading out, but probably by the end of this month or by the end of May, most of it would have been gone.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of out of the clear for the time being.
Yeah, we're lucky. I do consider that we were affected a little bit, but for the most part, it was business as normal for us. Still not quite sure what is going to happen.
And when you say you're unsure of how it's happened, as you can tell, anyone who knows how I usually operate on this podcast, you can see that I'm choosing my words incredibly carefully. Mostly because I'm so hyper aware that none of us know what's coming.
Yeah.
We don't have any idea, and I want to be really considerate.
But that
always.
That is really the vibe. It's not just specialty. It's commercial. It's all of it. Is that all of it. It's just speculation at this point. We're not completely sure what's going to happen. Like coffee, thankfully, is one of those products that in times like this seem to do better overall.
When you say better than other crops that are currently in the climate, or better than it does before this moment?
maybe not specialty, but better in the sense that people replace other products with coffee, right? So, say like if you remember the GFC,
Yep.
people would give up on alcohol, going out to
Right.
fine
But they
dining,
won't give up their coffee.
but they don't give up their coffee, and they end up replacing those things with things like coffee, like
Coffee.
going to a cafe, for example.
Which they can't do right now.
No, but retail coffee is booming,
Yep.
and we have seen overall businesses who supply slightly larger businesses who supply retail coffee to supermarkets, or who
They're
are
crushing it
even
right now.
medium-sized businesses who have an online presence or retail presence, are doing fantastic right now because people are at home. They still want to drink coffee.
Right.
At this point in time, people are still happy to pay for coffee because it's a treat. Now it's not just, oh, I'm just going to drink my Nescafe
It's
Gold.
an affordable luxury.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, I'm stuck at home and I want to do something nice for myself, and I can't just drink wine all day. Maybe I'll try this specialty coffee thing.
That's coming from someone who doesn't drink alcohol, so I can get away with saying that, having no idea what I'm talking about because I don't drink alcohol. But I assume that there are some people that are making a sport out of drinking wine right now.
Oh, I'm sure. I can definitely say that since all this has happened, thankfully now I'm not, because I don't have access to alcohol. But the week that I was in Kenya, that I thought I wasn't coming back home, is probably the most I've drunk in a long time. Consistently.
I have to tell you, I'd say obviously I don't drink alcohol. I've said that. And after being quarantined for 14 days and having experienced it, I'm like, I'm going to go for a walk today. And I have a liquor store at the end of my street. I think I'm going to go and buy a bottle of whiskey. And I am just going to have a shot for every person I know that recovers from this. I haven't done that yet because thankfully I don't know anybody else that's had it and got it quite badly. So that's great. But I have decided that with all my favorite people around the world, the first time I see them and can have a meal with them, I'm going to have a glass of wine.
Yes.
Just because this is one of those things that it warrants it.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back together with people. When I was in quarantine, my friend Angelo and his boyfriend Eric would walk up to my balcony and bring me like any supplies that I needed, and I would lower down a shopping bag on a rope. They would put it in the bag and I would pull it back up again.
Yeah.
I mean, and they would stand there and have conversations with me for an hour. That was kind of how it was back in the days when we were allowed to leave our houses. We're actually being told this week we've been asked by the governor not to leave our houses, even to go to the supermarket. He said it's not enforceable, but this is a make or break week. Mm-hmm. So don't even leave your house to go to the supermarket.
Yep. Stay at home.
Stay at home. And too many people aren't paying attention. But I've spoken about that crazy enough. Okay, so when we look at the way that Kenya kind of escaped any kind of initial possible doom with regards to the way that its coffee economy could be affected at this first phase of COVID-19, which is great. When it comes to, and you only deal with specialty, correct?
For me, yes. In my role, yes.
Right. What is, a rookie question here, but forgive me, what's the proportion of specialty to commercial coffee from Kenya?
I should know this.
Is it
Uh,
like 5%, 95%? Is it that vast a
over
difference?
No, overall, crop in Kenya isn't massive, and we do more specialty
Then commercial?
than than most other countries, but there is more commercial than specialty.
Okay.
Just off the top of my head, and I'm probably wrong about this, it's probably something like 20%, but I have to double check those figures.
But even that gives us a kind of a feel about, it's more than 50% of the crop is commercial
Yes. Yeah.
and it's
Quantity wise, it's
quantity
still that.
wise.
Yeah.
Right. So here's something that we have been trying to understand with regards to the effects, the potential effects moving forward. And as we said, I was very careful to make sure that we got there in a measured way. We don't know what's coming, right?
Yes.
All right. So from what I understand, there are three things that are going to play in the way that coffee moves forward. There's going to be the health implications of this. So if origin countries are hit hard with the virus, their workforce may be affected, and that may create a problem.
Yeah.
The second thing is the relationship with supply and demand. And the third thing is the US dollar.
Yeah.
Are there any other major variables that you can see that would influence, as we move forward in this conversation, influence the way that the supply chain is going to be affected and that the coffee price is going to be affected moving into the future?
I think overall it's just going to be the timeliness of being able to do things. If we're going to see, it's not just, it's all the logistics in between that will now slow down. The things that we don't think about, just simply moving coffee,
Right.
as well, would be impacted, since regulations might be tightened, quarantine might be extended. It will be more difficult to, particularly countries that, if lockdown is extended and curfews are extended, it will be difficult to get coffee to port.
So that's a fourth element to this. So
I think so.
logistics, right?
Logistics.
So just to recap those, and tell me if you think that any of those three aren't relevant to what we're going to start talking about now, which is the price of coffee moving forward into the future. So the health impact, the supply and demand relationship, the US dollar, and the logistics of coffee transporting from throughout the whole value chain is going to present a variable that will affect the price of coffee moving forward.
Yes.
Okay. So we received a variance on a whole bunch of questions around this subject for you and for Felipe for tomorrow's conversation. Felipe Croce from Brazil. So some of the kinds of things that people are asking is, first of all, what kind of reports are you following right now to give you a baseline understanding of what's happening? Other questions, and we'll start tackling these as we go. Will specialty suffer through this more than commodity coffee is going to suffer through this? And in what proportions do we expect that to happen if it does happen? Another thing people want to know, will there be more of a demand for one or the other? And is one or the other more likely to be affected in a predictable way from a pricing perspective?
Yeah.
So they're interesting questions, right?
Yes.
Are any of them answerable at this stage, do you think?
I think we can answer a fair amount of them,
Okay.
actually. maybe not with complete certainty, but you know,
I mean, even just getting on the record
yeah,
some predictions, and we're going to have you back in 6 months and then another 6 months
sure.
after that, because my whole thing with what we're doing right now on the podcast is, who are the people that I think their voices are balanced and are reasonable and aren't giving in to any kind of hype, and also have the experience and wisdom in the industry to be able to compare this to, you know, let's say 10 years experience of business as usual compared to this, and then be able to come to this and say, well, from my experience, I anticipate that this is what's going to potentially happen. And then be able to track that, given that a lot of this are shifting goals. So we want to document the history of how people like you, people who I respect enormously, are experiencing this pandemic and the relationship between this pandemic crisis clashing with a coffee price crisis.
Yep.
So that's probably another question that we got to get on the record is, you know, how is the pandemic crisis colliding with the coffee price crisis going to fare out through this?
In short,
Yeah.
the speculation right now is that we're going to see prices climb.
When you say climb, like, I'm hearing some astronomical numbers. What do you mean by climb?
Where is the market at today? Just quickly, we should check.
Yeah, we should check. I haven't checked it since the day before yesterday. I'm in the process of trying to save my other business as well.
I mean, from yesterday, I'm just thinking how I managed to do that. We've got July trading at 120.
Yeah, so it's been
So it has
teetering
steadily,
between 110 and 120 over the
Yeah.
last few weeks.
Yeah, so just seeing previously about since about one moment. I mean, in March there was a point where it was about 102,
Yeah,
and now we're sitting pretty much teetering around
120, right?
120, and it's been like that for.
Which, when you look at this time last year, we were
Yep.
around the 90s.
Yes.
So that was when, you know, I think 84 was the worst that it was last year. And it was a very different, we were at the peak of the price crisis at that point.
Yeah.
And so now we're at an extra, you know, 30 or so cents per pound, which is, it means a lot to producers when it's that much more. It's still not anything that could cover the cost of production for a specialty.
No.
Or it, I mean, is it, correct me if I'm wrong, it's pretty much only, and I hope for anyone who's watching, I am well aware that I'm touching my face and I apologize.
Okay.
I keep using the excuse, well, I've had it, so I've got the antibodies for it, so it doesn't matter. But hey, it's still, we don't know if people can be reinfected. So anyway,
Yep.
so with regards to that side of things, fuck, what was I saying?
Coffee price climbing.
Right. So is the price that it's at now for countries other than Brazil who have mechanized processing, is 130 even reasonable for those commercial coffee growers that don't have mechanized picking?
No, not particularly.
Right. So this hurts everyone.
Still, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Even at 130. All right. So when you say coffee prices are going to climb, are you of the opinion that they're going to do something crazy, or do you think?
No, because we're still coming into, like, there are a couple of factors that could affect it where it could swing either way, with Brazil still coming into a large crop, for
Yes.
example. So we'll have to see where it goes from there. And harvest is really, it'll begin in the next month or so. Um, and what will also affect that is demand. So depending on how things go with Corona and buying countries, we might see a drop in demand, and that might drop pricing again as well.
So it's not just, so this relationship between supply and demand is going to have a big impact on what price it is going to be set. Is that correct?
Yes.
So if the demand goes down, do you expect that the price will go down as well?
Yes.
Is there a likelihood that the supply could go down?
At this point, no. As long as people will still need to work, and they're still going to harvest coffee, we'll still need to move that coffee. That harvest is already sitting on the trees, pretty much ready to go.
Right. So Wilfred was saying to us the other day that they have, they've already picked the coffee in Panama. Wilfred Lamastas Jr. was saying that they've already picked the coffee, and they have to come up with new ways of processing that coffee using social distancing rules to ensure that people don't come into contact with each other, and you know, they can't not do that, otherwise they lose a full year's worth of crop.
Yeah.
And that's just not possible for them. They have people that they have to pay, and their goal for this whole situation is that as long as they can pay everybody on their staff, on their payroll, then it's a successful year. So that seems to be the new target, is as long as we can keep everybody paid and fed, we're good. As opposed to looking at, I mean, this is a company that was selling coffee at $1,000 a pound. Like they want, you know, so they've had to adjust in order to stay, or to meet the moment, meet the times of whatever, you know. Now, if there's an outbreak, let's say in a country that doesn't use mechanized picking, let's say Kenya. If there's an outbreak in Kenya and it gets in the coffee producing community, what's the potentiality for that?
I would say pretty severe, since most farmers, producers, and managers of co-ops are of an age that if they were to catch it, they would die.
Right.
And medical care, particularly out in rural areas, is not great. And at the moment, the whole country of, what's the full population of Kenya? In Nairobi is what, 4.5 million? Kenya in total is 49 million.
Right.
49 million people, and we have about 170 ventilators.
170 ventilators
For
49
million people.
Right.
Your average coffee farmer there is over the age of 50, I believe. Farm workers can be of varying age, but a lot of the time people prefer to work in cities. They get paid better. It's slightly more comfortable. If this gets out to these rural areas and spreads, we could lose a lot of coffee farmers. We'll lose management of co-ops. Who knows where it's going to go? Like you've got young people who can step in, but a lot of people don't want to, and
because it's fiscally not worth it, right?
Yes, and it could reset the whole industry. There is a worry. And this is the same thing, not just Kenya, but in many other countries. You have it's mostly an older population who are farmers who want to do this, and in ways, it's good that it's a rural life. As long as people aren't spreading it, it might be okay. But human nature, right? Like
Right.
when we first got news of this happening in Kenya, we had people say, "Oh, I'm just going to head out to the village."
Mm-hmm.
But if you have it, you're taking that with you.
Right.
So people
And
are considering that.
and having spent time in my parents' village in Syria, villages are typically a place where people live very close together. It's the charm of a village. You visit
Yeah.
each other, you meet at the local like food places, and all the kids play together. And I mean, the nature of a village isn't like what it's like in a city where we tend to stay in our apartments and keep quite separated, or stay in our car all the time. You know, people walk places in villages. You don't need to necessarily drive
You touch, you know, these people, so you're going to touch them and kiss them
constantly.
or hug
Yeah,
them,
yeah.
and yeah,
And asking people to believe you about a virus that they have a belief that it's a white person's virus, and then get them to observe a cultural difference than what they've been doing for generations is a big ask. It's
yes,
it's a really, really big ask.
yeah. And you've got these people who've lived through Ebola
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
AIDS and everything else. So this is just another thing, right?
Yeah.
That unfortunately people aren't taking as seriously as they should.
So if we go back to our 4 potential variables and we talk about this supply and demand issue, as businesses are getting hit from the consumer end and they're having to shift the way that they do business, we're experiencing a roasted coffee sales boom for businesses. We don't know how that's going to fashion itself for specialty coffee, because people, as they run out of money, may have to transition to buying cheaper supermarket brands.
Yes.
So that's also a shifting landscape from that point. So we don't know what's going to happen from the consumer end of things at this
Yeah.
point. From the demand end, it could go down, and if the demand goes down, the price could go lower so that they can shift more coffee to make it more affordable for people.
Yeah. Like it would be great to give people clear-cut answers,
Oh, no,
but
I know that we're not.
unfortunately, yeah.
No. And I want that to be clear
And
to anyone
yeah,
who's listening.
and I want people to know that this is these times are really unprecedented.
Yeah.
We're living in a really, really crazy time that it's all we can do is speculate
Right.
on what's going to happen.
But it's why I think it's important for us to have these conversations, Muki, because we don't know what's coming and we don't know how to approach it. And I think for people who watch these conversations or listen to these conversations can start pondering this stuff for themselves and taking these kinds of questions that I'm posing to you, and they can take them into their communities and say, hey,
I mean, just to be aware, like
exactly.
I guess when you look at this, like we don't know what's going to happen with specialty,
Right.
but I don't want it to die, and there is a
None of
little
us
bit of a
do.
risk of that, right? Like getting people to understand that if you can afford it, support a local business who's still buying specialty coffee, because down through the chain, that means the farmer is still producing specialty, and that they're still selling specialty.
Right. There's also the same thing is happening with commercial farmers. There are smallholder commercial farmers we spoke to Merling Preza from Nicaragua, and she is responsible for 4,200 smallholder producers who farm commercial grade coffee. And they do that in order to take care of their families. And, the coffee price crisis knocked them out.
Yep.
They just were so winded from that. I can only imagine what happens if you add something like this to the mix. What ends up happening if COVID-19 gets into communities like that? There's poor public health available to these people, and like with Kenya, a lot of these producers are older people because their children don't see the viable economics of producing coffee. It doesn't make sense.
Yep.
And they're doing it because it's a legacy thing in their family.
Yeah.
You know, they've inherited farms. This is what they know how to do. It makes them very proud to do what their parents did, etc., etc. So they continue to do it. But if COVID-19, from the healthcare perspective, enters a community, a coffee producing community, and affects that community, that could affect the supply of coffee from that origin.
Yep. There is one thing that I didn't really consider that I've only just thought about now is that younger population. We could see a return of young people to farming just purely on the fact that as lockdown, we don't know how long lockdown will go for. Mm-hmm. We do have a lot of people who've lost work. So
Right.
we might see young people returning to family business in agriculture just due to the fact that they
Out of
don't
necessity.
have, just necessity. But who knows? I mean, it might be good.
During an
in that
Instagram
sense.
live yesterday, Madeline, who is in the Hawaiian coffee community, was mentioning that Hawaii is heavily dependent on immigrant workers from Pacific Islands to come to Hawaii and help them pick for their crops. But because the borders have been closed, they won't get access to that workforce. And because of that, their crops being picked or not being picked is a real probability.
Yep.
I wonder how migration is going to, or the inability to migrate is going to pose as a real problem. It's not going to be just for coffee. We're going to experience the same issue here in California.
We've got problems here in Australia right now.
Yep. Yeah.
We're just picking fruit.
Yeah. Have you heard what one of the solutions that the government have proposed for that is in Australia?
Isn't it hiring locals?
Well, what they're going to do is for people who are currently on a visa from another country, they will extend your visa an extra 6 months as long as you agree to stay, use 3 of those months to pick fruit or do something in agriculture. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be an important kind of that they're going to mitigate this, I think.
Yeah.
That they're proposing.
Yeah.
That I think I'm back. That's one of the solutions that they're proposing, or as an option, I think, to this situation. So we've identified there that the health situation could affect supply. The economic situation in buying countries could affect demand. Mm-hmm. We've migration of workers or the workforce could affect the ability to supply coffee. So it could create a shortage if we can't get the coffee off trees and into...
At the very least, it'll reduce quality.
Right, so there's not only the quantity, there's the quality as well, especially for specialty, right? Because it's labour intensive.
Yes.
Right. So then another part of that I wanted to talk about is the US dollar. So this is something I need help understanding.
Yeah.
What role will the strength of the US dollar play in this situation for people who are buying coffee and people who are selling coffee?
Well, if we look at Australia, just as an example, it's made it incredibly difficult for people with where the Aussie dollar is sitting compared to the US, which, I mean, at this very point in time, to AUD.
What is it, like 55 or something?
Yeah, I've got us up. AUD to 0.62. 0.62.
It's doing better than it was. It's still shit, but it's still better than it was.
Yeah. Just to buy coffee is so much more expensive than it was about a year ago, where I think I can't quite remember what it was this time last year, but it was somewhere in the 70s, right?
Yeah, it's 75.
Yeah.
It was teetering around 75.
Yeah.
So it's going to cost you an extra 10 cents per pound just because of the US dollar shifting, or the Aussie dollar shifting against the US dollar now compared to a year ago.
Yes. Yeah, at the very least. And that's impacted on how much specialty people can buy and what kind of quality they can buy.
Right.
I remember that many years ago, when the Australian dollar was good, a lot of roasters here had the ability to buy almost anything that they wanted.
Right.
In Australia, that is. And now we're at a point where people come and they have to sort of seek value, best bang for buck, or value for money, because to drop what is it? USD to AUD, $5 a pound, $8 a pound for coffee is, with how things cost, it's quite ridiculous, right?
Right. That's
So,
$8 Aussie per pound.
yeah, that would be, without really any other costs involved, that's like almost an $18 a kilo green.
Which is astronomical.
Yeah.
That's
a very
that's
rough, broad pricing, but that's just like, let's say that's the base price for green. That's not considering the cost to move it or store it or finance it or anything else. That's already astronomically high with where it's currently sitting, right? And $5 FOB, or $5 a pound for green coffee in, say, Kenya for a specialty lot, is fairly normal. So when you put everything else on top of that, I'm going to say that's probably going to sit closer to the $25 mark a kilo.
That's green. So
that's green.
To give people an understanding, buying roasted coffee at $30 a kilo 5 years ago was kind of like, that was where the specialty sweet spot was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you were, that was, you know, you were buying some decent specialty coffee back then.
Yeah.
That's roasted. That's roasted in the cafe, $30 a kilo if you were doing some decent volume. That is going to be blown so out of the water now.
Yeah. I mean, it's already hard enough with where things are. And then on top of that, the thing is, you've got such a fluctuation in pricing due to the USD against the Australian dollar, just as an example, that we don't change the price of coffee here to reflect that. Right. Like, even with these fluctuations, often people will buy this and still sell it at $45 a kilo, or whatever it is that they're moving it at. And it doesn't reflect how much they're actually paying for the coffee.
So I know that you aren't working in cafes and that you aren't running a cafe, but I mean, from what you used to see back when you were working in Australia with Condesa Colab, how I want to use the word frigid, but maybe it's not the right word. How reactive and how triggered are people by a shift in pricing?
I love this conversation. No, I know.
You know where I'm going, right?
Yes, I've read many a thing about it. So I did used to work in cafes.
Yeah. No, that's why you're someone who I love having a conversation with about this stuff, because you've gone through the whole gambit of professions in coffee. You've done all of it. You know what I'm saying? And now you've worked your way backwards through the value chain.
Yeah.
right?
Started as a barista and just
Yeah, and you kept
kept
going
going.
back.
Uh,
Now you're right at the
yeah, I
beginning.
hope
You finished
I'm
at the
smart
beginning.
enough to never buy a coffee farm, but I'm still I'm
I don't
still
like your
young.
chances, lady. I think you're a little bit too in love.
We'll see. We'll see. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Hopefully I'm wise enough.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll come back in a couple of years, shall we?
Yeah. Uh, this is a conversation I always love to have because I'm always amazed at how reactive people are to putting up the price of coffee, particularly people who aren't in the coffee industry. And you see it every time you read an article or watch a YouTube video or anything about specialty. It just freaks the hell out of people. Like you can put how many times have we put up the price of cigarettes here in Australia? People have a whinge about it, but they still buy.
Wait. Tell people what it costs for a packet of cigarettes in Australia. Americans don't believe me.
So a pack of Marlboro
25s.
like 25s will set you back. I think now I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it's like more than $30 Australian.
Closer to $50.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man. I mean, you can go buy a packet of 20, like a 20 pack of cigarettes in Kenya for $3 USD.
So
$3 USD.
when I tell people that here, they don't believe me at all. They think that I'm either. The first question is, do you smoke though? How do you know that number? I'm like, who can afford to smoke at that price?
And the last time I purchased cigarettes in Australia, which might have been, I don't know, 6 months ago or something like that,
Yeah.
I paid something like $35.
Yeah.
Which
wow.
is at today it's about 20, 21, 22 USD for a packet
For a
of
packet
cigarettes.
of 25 cigarettes. To give you some understanding, like, look, for anyone who's going to send me a fucking email and tell me, God, you're old. Back when I was a kid, I'm 45. So this was like, let's say 40 years ago. No, not even that long. Like my parents had a gas station, a petrol station, and we sold cigarettes there. And cigarettes back then, when they started to get expensive and we thought, like we were concerned because people stopped smoking, they were $5 a packet.
Wow.
And people were saying, if this goes above $5.50, I'm going to stop smoking.
No, but people haven't.
And look, it's up a packet of like the Horizons, the ones that are, I only know these because I used to work in my parents' petrol station. But the Horizon, the 50 packs, they're like well over between $50 and $65 now.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
And so, like, when you think about it, like in the 90s, this is going back to the 90s, cigarettes were, or the 80s, cigarettes were between $3 and $5 a packet.
Mm-hmm. And my parents had a corner store when I was in high school, which is like 15 odd years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember a pack of cigarettes, depending on the brand, was anywhere between $10 to $15.
Yeah, this is a whole different gamut. So our point here is like cigarette prices continue to get put up, and people still buy them.
If we look at something else, beer, right? The price of beer.
Yeah. Mark Dundon loves this analogy.
Yeah, that goes up. I like using this one too because people have a whinge about it, but they'll still go and drink it. You can a pot of beer or a schooner, which is about 400 and what is it, like 425 milliliters. It's your average size glass
which is
any
about
pub
16
or bar.
ounces, I think, here.
Yeah, I think so. Is it 12 or 16? Something like that. Anyway, that goes up 50 cents to $1 every 6 months or so.
Does it really?
Yeah, depending on the laws and the taxes that come into place.
Yep.
Back when I used to work in bars, which has admittedly it's been a while, I just remember every 6 months or so things would go up about 50 cents or
But
20
even
cents.
we couldn't put the price of a cup of coffee up 50 cents.
No, that's the thing, right?
There's no chance. Like you will lose your
How does
customers.
beer go from $3.50 to $4 to $5 in the space of a couple of years? People have a whinge, but they'll still go out and do it. Yet we can't put up the price of coffee 50 cents without people absolutely losing their shit over it.
Yeah, yeah. It's one, and I think I know why. I have an answer to the why. I don't have an answer to the fix. The reason why is our fault. We have a coffee branding crisis.
I mean, we've undervalued the product in the straight up in the beginning. That it's people. There is, I guess, with the wider, and I'm not just talking specialty though, but overall coffee in general. It's a product.
I think it's more complex than that, Muki.
Yeah.
It's not that we've just undervalued it. I think we've confused the consumers.
Oh yeah.
Because we call instant coffee, and we call the highest specialty grade,
Yes.
a liter estate
Yeah.
coffee. We call that coffee as well. And because we have diluted the messaging of what coffee is, that's what's caused the problem.
Yeah. And for the average person, when you read anything about what's the best way of saving money, the first recommendation is almost
Make your coffee at
always
home.
make your coffee at home and buy Folgers or something like that. Like the best brand of commercial coffee that you can get. You'll save some money. You'll save like, I don't know, $1 a day or $1 a cup or whatever it is.
Yeah. Or go
But
buy it
there's
at
no-
7-Eleven.
Yeah. And there's no distinction between why you would want to do that or why you would want to buy a better quality product, because for at that point it's all just coffee.
Right.
But if you're drinking beer, or let's say you're drinking wine, if you're into that, you know that there is a difference between something that comes out of a goon sack versus a Chateau Rothschild,
Right.
or something like that, right?
And that's why I say we have a branding crisis with coffee, because we haven't put the effort as an industry to differentiate ourselves out as specialty coffee versus all the other kinds of coffee.
Yeah.
And if we put the marketing dollars into shifting that messaging and creating our specific brand as an industry, then we could help people understand that there's us and then there's everything else. And then people could make an educated understanding as to why it is worth choosing to drink this specific kind of coffee. But right now, they don't understand the difference between the coffee that we make in cafes versus the coffee that's being sold at 7-Eleven.
A lot of
And
people
that's-
don't understand just the sheer amount of work that goes into it, and why out of
Right.
many products that you purchase, it's so deserving of your money.
Right, but when we're telling people that what we're serving them is coffee, and 7-Eleven is telling them that what they're serving them is coffee, all they see is that the difference that between the coffee that they're getting at 7-Eleven versus the coffee that they're getting at a specialty coffee shop is that a machine's making it versus a barista's making it. They don't understand that the coffee that a specialty cafe is using versus the coffee that 7-Eleven is using, they're apples and oranges.
Yep.
But because we're calling it all coffee, we're creating our own demise.
Yep. It's a difficult one to fix.
And that's what I'm saying. Like I can absolutely, after thinking about this intensely for the last 2 years, I understand what the nature of the beast is. So I get what the fundamental problem is. It's not the consumer. The consumer isn't being given adequate marketing to fix this situation. They don't understand the nature of the problem. They don't even think there's a problem.
Yep.
As far as they're concerned, I could get coffee from here, or I could get coffee from there, or I could get coffee from there. I don't know why they're all priced differently, but maybe just because the business owners are greedy.
Yep. And
They
quite
don't-
often that's a reaction.
Right. And so we haven't given them enough reason or invested enough money as an industry, and I don't know how we do that, but we haven't got our shit together enough to turn around and say, hey, we need to help you understand the difference between all these
how
coffees.
do you get, like, most people, even if they're, I know the reaction to good coffee is that it's something bougie.
Yeah.
You often get, right? Like, it's,
the
people,
$100 a
people
cup.
get sort of push it away, like, oh, I don't want to do that. It's just too much. It's too hipster. It's too bourgeois. It's too uppity, too snobby. Yet, a lot of people, if they had the choice, if they had the money to drop between buying Smirnoff or Grey Goose, they're going to buy the Grey Goose.
But Grey Goose has put the effort into separating themselves out.
Yes.
They invested the marketing money. We haven't.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. I don't know how to fix it.
Yeah. And that's where I'm saying that people innately do this already. So why can't they do it with coffee?
Well, because we haven't given them a reason to.
Yep.
We haven't gone out there and said, hey, do you know that the coffee that they're selling at 7-Eleven represents a different supply chain or a different value chain than what the coffee we're selling is. Mm-hmm. We just haven't done that. And I think the reason we haven't done that is because we haven't recognized the true nature of the problem. I think that we have to start finding a way to call instant coffee something different than specialty coffee and something different than 7-Eleven coffee.
Yeah.
But how do you do that?
Right? It's a big change.
Yeah, and until we can understand how to do that, I don't think it's fair of us to put the onus on consumers to fix this problem for us. It's our problem.
Yeah. You can't just expect people to pay more, particularly in times like this. We're not
giving them a reason to.
Yeah.
We're not giving them an adequate reason to say, you know what, the coffee that I'm buying from 7-Eleven isn't actually paying farmers a fair price. And why would 7-Eleven want to be invested in messaging that? They're getting away with doing what they're doing. Mm. So the business model works for them. The business model works for companies who are selling instant coffee, like not the good kind of instant coffee. The business model is working for the operators at the end of the brand problem that I'm talking about that exploits the supply chain. It exploits the producers. So why the hell would they want to separate themselves out from us when they don't have to? We're the ones who have to make the effort to separate ourselves out as a specialty coffee community out from the commercial coffee group.
Yeah. I mean, anyone can call what they're doing specialty coffee. There's no restriction on that. Right?
Not really. Nobody's policing it.
Yeah.
And a lot of them don't care to care.
Yeah.
I mean, I was saying on Instagram Live today, for anyone who's listening to this, we do an Instagram Live 7 days a week on our Instagram at IMapItForward as a way to be supportive of the community throughout this COVID-19 crisis and to have really interesting conversations like this so that we can kind of think about what are the things that we're curious about understanding. And then I bring a lot of the questions that we ask in that group to the podcast questions so that fabulous professionals like Muki can help us understand a lot of the things that we don't know are happening. And a lot of them are predictions at this point, but it's just fun to see how it's going to move forward. But we were talking about it in the Instagram Live today. And one thing I was saying is that these people who were going out there and buying commodity coffee at $1 a pound, the cheapest, shittiest commodity coffee they could find, and trying to palm it off as specialty grade coffee. And they had these huge, massive margins that they were selling this coffee at. Once these numbers skyrocket, that's going to become completely untenable as a model for them. So one good thing is that this is going to wipe them out, hopefully.
Oh, we'll see.
So we've talked about what it will do to the specialty price. This is, I guess, talking off what I was just saying. What do you think this will do to the commercial price?
Um, at the moment, uh, just like everything else, it's hard to tell. It's We might see a reduction in the volume of specialties, so there might be more commercial. It's highly likely that we'll probably see more commercial, and see the volume of specialty overall reduce, just because people can afford to, they won't be able to afford to invest in their crop the way that they have been, depending on how things go.
How does it work for somebody who hasn't been to a coffee farm before? How does it work from that perspective? If they can't tend to their crops the way that they did, will they just continue with the same crops that they've got and just sell it as commercial?
If they can't achieve that quality, like to
Right.
get quality coffee, you have to consider that a farm has to, they have to pay for these things. They have to pay for the inputs, whether that's
Fermentation tanks and
fertilizers,
yeah.
maintenance of equipment, labor, and everything costs money. So your fungicides, your sprays, the labor, equipment hire or maintenance, labor for pruning, or basically everything. Like that all goes into quality, and it doesn't just happen. You can't just let not tend a tree and hope that you're going to produce quality. And
Right.
then on top of that, you have to pay for the the labor for processing, an agronomist maybe. Like all of that goes into producing something that's quality. And if you don't have the funds coming in, you're going to have pick and choose. Okay, what do I want more? And usually in that case, it will just be yield will
Right.
trump will trump quality, right?
Right. So they'll invest the money in making sure that they can get the cherries off the tree and process it as effectively and efficiently as
Yeah.
possible.
So
So
they might decide in that year, I'm going to use less fertilizer, or I'm going to use less sprays. So in that case, they might get unlucky, and the screen size that they get will be smaller than normal, which will be typically classified as a lower grade, and they'll get paid less for it.
right.
Or maybe there'll be an outbreak of roya or rust or borer or something like that, or another pest or disease, because they didn't have the money to try to
Protect
contain that.
against it.
So their coffee might have a higher percentage of defects because of that. And then on that, it would be considered a lower grade. So all of these things affect quality and price. So a farm that might have produced 10% specialty, or balance their commercial out with something that's really high quality and get margin from that specialty grade, might have less of that. Maybe they
Right.
won't be able to produce specialty at all that year, just due to all the conditions. So
And so that goes back to the whole supply and demand thing. The supply of commercial may increase if what was before still continues to remain.
yeah,
If we don't have the impacts of the health situation and people are able to continue to pick as per usual, the availability of commercial may go up and specialty go down as a consequence of just being able to manage the workforce.
yep, yep.
Wow. So at this point, anyone who's watching live, I want to invite you to ask any of the questions. We did say during the Instagram live today that we would take any questions that you had around this point of the conversation. I've still got some questions to ask Muki as well. If anyone who's watching, I apologize that I keep moving. It's just that we don't normally do podcasts at this time of day, and I have a sunspot that's just on my nose. So I keep trying to move around, so I apologize for that. What are some of the trusted sources and reports that you're using to track the predictions of what's going to come with all of this?
So I'm lucky that I get a lot of reports thanks to work from various analysts, like trade analysts, market analysts. That might be difficult for some people to obtain, but you could probably do some digging. Rabobank is a good one to read.
Which one?
If you can get Rabobank.
RAB.
OBANK. We get our own internal reports as well, and regular news from different origins on how they're being affected. Just do a lot of this will be very dry reading for those who don't understand it, but just search for it, look out for it. There's news out there. It's just not specialty media.
Right.
Yeah. And it doesn't hurt to try to learn a little bit about it.
No. And look, we're trying to bring as much information as we can through this podcast to help educate people on this kind of stuff. What were you about to say, Muki?
Yeah, just learn to understand it a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Somebody made a comment to me the other day and they said the C market had inverted. Do you know what that means?
The C market had inverted. As in
it's cheaper to buy coffee in the future than it is to buy it now.
Yes.
Help me understand that if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, wait, what do you mean by that?
We can have a conversation about that and dissect that like off air if you like, because it's someone who's not allowed to come on the podcast.
Okay.
I'm happy to have them on the podcast, but they work for a company that they're not allowed to come on the podcast. That, it's just one of their rules. They're not allowed to do any media. So I'm just wondering, when you say it's cheaper to buy coffee in the future, I'm assuming that means off the C market. Or is that just
if
off
they're
contract?
trading futures?
Yeah.
I mean, you could lock in a price now.
Is it cheaper to buy off the C than it is to buy spot?
Yes.
Right now? Is that possibly what they mean?
Okay. Now, if they're saying that, I mean, this is complex. It's depending on people are really trying to move inventory right now, and there is a lot of stock.
By people, you mean importers?
Importers. Yeah. A lot of people are carrying a fair amount of stock in their warehouses, and the price of that coffee was at a time where the market was about 20 to 30 cents lower than it is now.
I see where you're going with this. The US dollar, blah, blah, blah. Okay, go. Let's keep on the pace of what you were saying. That was, you got there really quick. Thanks. Go ahead.
So in that case, if you're buying spot at this point in time, depending, yes, it is cheaper than to buy coffee now, as in now, like if you're buying coffee to export now based on where the market is at versus buying spot. Depending on what you're buying, yeah, it could. It probably is in some places, and in some cases cheaper.
To buy coffee in the future than it is to buy spot because of what the dollar's doing right now?
No, I would say the opposite. Actually. Yeah.
because of what the dollar will do in the future.
Yeah. I mean, it's all speculation. We still don't know where everything's going to go. Don't know where the market's going to go, especially leading up to this Brazil crop. I'm really interested to see
What will happen with Brazil?
what's going to happen with everything.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what in our conversation with Felipe tomorrow, like what the vibe is in Brazil right now, and what they think is the potential challenges with that, because it's a really compact society in parts of Brazil, and the economic impact of what could happen with regards to COVID-19 and the high numbers that they could experience. They're also going through massive protests with regards to Bolsonaro.
They have a very interesting president.
They really do. I mean, our president here is interesting, but Bolsonaro is even more.
He's on
so,
another level.
Oh yeah,
right?
100%. From anyway, that's just my opinion. It's not. Yeah. And so the country is using the current situation to protest against Bolsonaro. They're being faced with COVID-19. Will Brazil feel the impacts of the US dollar?
They do. They do.
And so
where the real
Yeah.
sits compared to the USD affects them greatly, since most of their it's not just coffee they're trading after all. It's also
Right.
corn, soy, and that's all. They're all commodities.
Right. And so all of these things are going to come into play with countries like Brazil, as well as the way that they do in countries like Kenya, right?
Yep.
Are there any origins from what you can see that are going to be less affected than any other origins?
I don't think so.
Will the time of harvest be an advantage to some countries? Like, it sounds like Kenya escaped this original hit.
I think Kenya and Central, in a way, were lucky with the timing of things. Central, in particular, with a lot of their labor move around country to country to pick coffee.
Yeah.
So if a lockdown happens, you're not going to have any. You're not going to be able to find labor. We're lucky in a way, in the sense that the main part of our harvest, the main part of our crop and visitor season all happened just before the really crazy hit.
Now, if this goes for another 6 to 8 months, that will start coming into Kenya's next harvest, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And if Kenya's hit hard, that's when we'll start to see some problems for the next season's crop.
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll probably see, heading into the main crop, if people can't prepare, don't have the funds or don't have the labor to prepare for harvest, there might be a reduction in quality and volume. Right. And that's probably 3 to 6 months away.
How are the banks showing up for this in Kenya? Are they scared? Are they ready to lend money? Are they holding back? And has there been any reaction yet?
Now, not particularly banks, but one of the things that I haven't had the time to research, but I am curious to see, Kenya has a lot of NGOs and funding provided to co-ops and farms and producers via these NGOs, the UN, embassies funding projects, and they're not there now.
Right. Well, like with your company, right? So if this was 6 months from now and you still couldn't get back, what would happen? Is there somebody to take your job that's in country?
We've got people there. Yes, I would hope that I could go back.
But let's say that Australia says we're not opening our borders until we have a vaccine.
I mean, with my visa and with what I do, import export, if I can get a flight at this point in time, I can go back,
Right.
even right now. And I hope that doesn't change. So I'm lucky in that sense. If it came down to it and I absolutely couldn't go back, there are people there who could
Okay.
who could step up. But it's also the matter of, with what I do and with what people want out of Kenya, it's one of those origins that even if people don't travel anywhere else, they travel to Kenya.
When you
And
say people, you mean coffee
buyers,
people. Yep.
yep, just due to the nature of things, like it's a Kenya, the price of Kenyan coffee is higher than pretty much everywhere else. We are consistently the most expensive. Discounting,
region.
say, Panama
Yep.
or something like that, where you're going to have the occasional lot that's very, very, very expensive.
$1,000 a
But
pound, yeah.
overall, we're averaging somewhere between it's around $4 a pound, which is very high.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Where does Ethiopia sit in this?
At the moment, they've had new laws come in to set a minimum price, and I think it's somewhere around the 3 to 3.50 mark.
For specialty? This law applies to specialty or for everything?
For everything.
So they're not allowed to export coffee for less than that?
Yeah, please look into that. I can't remember the exact figure.
It's good to just have an idea
Yeah.
that that's what's gone on. Okay, so they don't produce. Surely they produce massive quantities of commercial coffee.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So does that price apply to that as well, or just a specialty?
I think so.
Okay.
I really need to. I've only read and heard very little bit about this, so I know that something's happened, but I don't know the exact figures.
When is their harvest?
Ethiopia is around the same time as Kenya.
Okay.
So, yeah, basically all of East Africa sits at a similar time. So we had Ethiopia, Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda. From what I know, Rwanda and Burundi, they're coming into harvest pretty much right now.
Oh.
I was supposed to travel to Rwanda in March and couldn't.
So what happens there, Muki? Do they just go business as usual until they're told not to?
Basically, yes, because you have to harvest this coffee. You've worked all year to get this crop. You can't just leave it. You've got no choice.
So
you've got to try to do something with it.
I mean, it's like what Wilford was saying the other day. You just have to figure out the social distancing. Will they go to that effort though? Will they go to the effort of trying to figure out how to stay separate from each other? Will they go?
Well,
is that plausible?
Rwanda is quite good.
Okay.
So I think they'll make a good attempt on it. But it's agriculture.
Yeah.
It's difficult. You're going to need to be in close contact with people. I mean, even just picking coffee. Picking coffee is a social thing.
Right.
Like people get together, they sing. It's tough work, but it's also beautiful to watch.
Imagine.
You know, people coming together, singing, going about their day, chatting, gossiping.
But
but you're in close quarters.
I even imagine meal times.
Yes.
You know,
sharing meals together, particularly if say a family all work as pickers, you've got extended family there, you're together. And even when I was in Brazil and working with the women's women in coffee group, they were all together.
Yeah.
Picking coffee in close quarters, and then if you stop to have lunch or tea, it's incredibly social.
Yeah.
Joking, laughing, gossiping, singing.
Wow. I mean,
how are you going to change that?
Exactly. And how can we? You can't even expect. You just can't expect that people are going to do it as much as we want them to do it, so that they keep themselves safe. These cultural ways are often more important and religious ways. Like people, I'm hearing a lot, people in rural communities saying, well, if God wants to take me, it's his plan for me. So,
Yeah.
typically in rural communities, they can be very religious. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see what role that plays in all of it as well.
And in Kenya, they had to force close churches
Yeah.
and mosques because people were still going to go.
I saw the most ridiculous video yesterday of a church here in the US. I believe it was in South Carolina.
I think I read something about this.
So the community got together and the preacher, pastor, priest, whatever you call him, he got them to take a deep breath in and repeat after him and then go and breathe out, like spit out. They're all in the same room, big, massive room, and say, coronavirus be gone. Mm-hmm. Bro, you just asked everybody to spit on each other. It's like, you can't pray that away.
I'm not a Christian, but I did go to a religious school, and I studied. I had to take religious studies, mm-hmm. and I do remember something in the Bible about it being completely okay to worship from home.
Yes, I'm a recovering Catholic, and I was a devout Catholic, and there's nothing that says, because I remember all houses are the homes of God and etc. You don't have to be in a church. Yeah, spitting on each other is not encouraged at this time. Speaking in close proximity to each other is not even recommended. Now they have asked all people that leave their homes in California, please wear a face mask. Mm-hmm. And I was told by for anyone who's listening who doesn't have this information and didn't watch our Instagram live, somebody who works in a lab that's processing the COVID-19 tests has told me that if you're going to wear a scarf over your face, or some sort of a covering, make sure you put a coffee filter between your mouth, nose, and that scarf, so that, because the scarf isn't protection enough. So this was someone who is processing the tests, and that's the information that they've been given. So put a coffee filter over your mouth and then put a cloth or whatever as a scarf over it, because the coffee filter, 2 coffee filters, not just one, the protection that it gives will absorb and protect you from the virus. So that's just a wee bit of a tidbit. Mm-hmm. Muki, is there anything we haven't covered that we should put on the radar?
In terms of how this is affecting coffee or Corona in general?
Yeah. I mean, we didn't really talk a lot about Corona. We talked about it in relation to coffee, but is there anything that you think that we still have to put on the radar with regards to coffee and this current crisis?
I guess just support who you can. It all makes a difference in the end, and it's a hard time for everyone.
Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah. And we haven't seen, at the moment, how, like, it's immediately affecting baristas, roasters, and coffee in consuming countries. But there's going to be a delay in how that's going to affect Origin. We're not going to really see how that affects Origin for probably a couple of months yet, right?
Yeah, probably more into next year, into like the harvests that are coming, right?
So support, if you can, support who you can, and have these conversations with people that you're in touch with, who aren't in coffee, because they're really, it's information that people need to know, right?
Right.
If you can educate someone that you know about why it's important to support a small business near you. So instead of going to a supermarket or ordering online some brand off the supermarket shelf, or order from someone local who's doing it hard, who really deserves your support right now. Yes, it might be more expensive, but they deserve your money.
Yeah, if you can afford it.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm not quite sure if we answered, which was one of the questions, was will the collision of the pandemic crisis and the coffee price crisis, will it amplify the consequences of the coffee price crisis, or will it change its trajectory completely?
Hard to tell. I think it's going to change the trajectory.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will you come back in 6 months and we can have a chat about some of your predictions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hopefully I'll be back in Kenya in 6 months.
I have my fingers crossed for you. I don't know that any of us will be out of our homes by then. I think that we're stuck here for the rest of the year. But who knows? Like, I'm so excited to be wrong on that one, because I've got 2 businesses that I got to get back up and running. But you know, it is what it is. I just stay safe, lady. Please, seriously. Like, you're,
I mean,
you're one of the good ones.
thank you. And if people want to know a little bit more about what happened as an expat living in Origin,
Yeah.
I could cover that a little bit. It's an interesting story, I guess.
Yeah. Have we ever talked about that? We talked about it last time about Brazil. We talked about it a little bit. I would love to spend a bunch of time the next time we chat talking about what it's like to have been, because has it been 6 months yet that you've been living there?
No, it's been since the 1st of December last year.
So you're just getting, oh no, it's still a few months before you get your footing there. But next time, in 6 months, let's chat about what the first 6 months, or 9 months has been like.
Yeah.
Living there before this and then returning back there, and what it's all like. That would be really interesting too.
Oh yeah. Like I think life there, it's going to change. I was really grateful to have experienced what it was like before, but even going back, who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, I know. I was speaking to my relatives in Syria, and that's the Arab culture is, you know enough wogs in Sydney to know what Arabs are like. We're all we're kissy and huggy, and we're very loud, and we talk all over each other, and we're all in each other's faces, and we're constantly touching each other, and we dance holding hands and all that kind of stuff. We share food. It's a very close culture, and it's all changed now in my parents' village in Syria. The government issued them, they said that they had 48 hours to buy all the groceries that they needed for the next few weeks, and everything will be shut down after that, and go into your homes and be safe.
How long for?
2 weeks.
Okay.
And then they'll reassess after that. So if you want to leave, there's going to be the army on the streets, just making sure, like there are police on the streets everywhere. They're going to be making sure that people stay safe, but that, Syria doesn't have the capacity to deal with this kind of a crisis after having been in civil war for 7 years or 8 years or whatever it is. And so something like this breaks out, it's not going to be okay.
Yeah.
So, Muki, thank you for having this conversation. It really means a lot to me. I know that you must be going half out of your mind, having been in the Sheraton for this long.
So long.
It could be worse, but we really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate the sincerity that you brought to the discussion. It's hard to know what's happening and what's going to come from all of this, but I really appreciate it.
No, it's been, thank you for inviting me. It's always nice to chat and share my knowledge and experience with people. And if anyone has any questions, I'm absolutely more than happy to answer them. So just hit me up.
And we will include Muki's details, her Instagram details, in the show notes. And also, if you want to come back to this, Muki's details are on our Instagram. She's tagged in the post. And yeah, thanks for everything that you're doing. You're a real champion in the industry, and I really respect it. Respect the shit out of you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everyone. Have an amazing rest of your day. I've got to get out of the sun. I can't believe I'm inside and in the sun. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everyone. Peace out. Bye.